Very warm welcome. My name is Kasim, and for the last year, I've been doing research into the social and psychological reasons that leads some fathers to abandon their children, to become deadbeat dads, and really around this issue of fatherlessness. And there were five reasons that I put in the book that led me to really why I was even interested in this area, which originally I was not interested in at all in remotely, and it wasn't something I was going to do research on. Um, and I'd like to share them with you today. Maybe you might find them useful. Maybe they might be insight. They might give you some level of insight into me and why I sort of became interested in the subject. But here are the five reasons. So, as I began off by saying, I never wanted to research fatherlessness. I never wanted to interview men. I never wanted to look into what the social or the psychological reasons why fathers abandon their children. As a matter of fact, if you read online and you follow my story, you will know that I have what I call my 10-year vision. My 10-year vision is a set of 10 books that I've committed to write over a 10-year period. And literally, I know what each book is supposed to be. And the last book that I wrote um, was about why men don't come to therapy. And so after that book, there was another book which was supposed to be about the five spheres of life, and everything was on track. But somehow I've ended up having to write this book, and people have been asking me, Kasim, well, why are you writing this book when you're already on a trajectory to write a certain amount of books and you've committed to it? And so these are some of the reasons. So let me begin off by saying this. Um, I am a sperm donor. I'm a sperm donor for four children, meaning that online there is a load of women who basically are either lesbians, they are single mothers by choice, meaning that they wanted a child, but they didn't want the father to be in the child's life, which I'll talk about in just a second because it's relevant to this point. And they were looking for a sperm donor. They were looking for a man who was prepared to give them their sperm. And what happens is you basically end up putting your semen in a cup. They then use a tube to take out the semen, and then they basically insert it in the woman who's going to become pregnant. Before This is a very long story, but before I ended up of how I actually even ended up getting to that, which I'm not going to get into today because it's a very long story. But before I decided to go and actually end up giving my sperm to these women, I did a lot of research into is it the right thing to do? I looked into what are the effects of children who have gone through this sort of thing. I looked into adoption. I looked into fostering, and I found what were the issues, what were the questions that kids wanted to know, what were the issues that in adulthood presented, and I wrote a contract, and I wrote down all of these things in a contract with like my name, my favorite color, the reasons why I decided to become a sperm donor, because these were the questions that kids basically who were adopted or fostered or were came into life via sperm donor wanted to know. In the process of doing all of this, it meant that I ended up talking to a lot of women because I was trying to figure out I want to give this sperm, my sperm, and to donate to a woman and a family who actually deserves it, who's going to be a good person, who is going to love this child, because I'm not going to be in the child's life. And the reason why I'm not going to be in the child's life, which leads to what I was saying earlier on, is that the vast majority of the women did not want the man to be in the child's life. Is one of the first questions they would ask is that what is the method that you wish to basically produces baby. So there is NI, which is natural insemination, as many of you would assume, is where you literally have sex and then you make the woman pregnant. But of course, many of the women who were in this situation were lesbians, so is not going to work out. The second other way is AI, which is artificial insemination, which is literally, as I said, which is where you ejaculate in a cup or a tube, like a plastic tube thing. You use a tube to take it out, and then or a syringe, and then you put it inside of the woman. And that's the way in which. And then the second question is, and the thing that many of them said is, they want no contact. Now, remember, by this point, I have not in any way interested in fatherlessness, but it plays a part because down the road, what ended up happening was, of course, I'm hearing and reading, which now leads into the second thing. I'm hearing about all of these statistics. I'm hearing about fatherlessness. I'm hearing about the amount of people who are not having children, who are not having babies, and how it's becoming a big problem in Britain. I'm hearing about the fatherlessness issue in Britain and across the world, and how it's becoming a big issue. And much of the plight and much of the issues and the people who are advocating and who are angry and frustrated are, of course, women. So now I have a problem because basically I have these two contradicting things. I'm meeting all of these women who absolutely none of them do not want the man to be in the child's life. They don't. Now you have to understand, and actually, before I go on, so I'm meeting all of these women who don't want the father to be in the child's life, but then on the other hand, I'm hearing all these women talking about fatherlessness and how all these fathers are. So there's a contradiction. And so for me, you have to understand that I was very shocked to learn that there are women out there who want a child and they don't want the father to be in the child's life. This was shocking for me. I'd never met people who didn't want their father to be in their life. I would have assumed as a mother, a you would want the father to be in the child's life because it is going to be of benefit to you. Of course, as I later on went to find out, specifically when it came to meeting and interviewing women who wanted to be mothers by choice, it meant that there are many, many, many women, of course, as I found out in the research, who did not want, they wanted the baby, but they didn't want the man in the child's life. They wanted that to be their baby. They wanted to be their child. They did not want the man in the life in the child's life. And so when one of the things that's added to this fatherlessness is that there are a lot of women who wanted the baby and who wanted the child, but they did not want the marriage. They did not want the man in their life. They wanted to have full control, full power, full choices about how the child is raised, what school they go to, what religion they grow up in, what they eat. They wanted to have full control, and they were fearful that if they allowed the man to stay in the child's life, then they wouldn't be able to have that. Well, you don't know this, but one of the things that I talk about in the book is one of the reasons why there's a lot of fathers who don't see their children is because of these 50-50 custody. There's a lot of parents who want to have full custody, particularly from the mother's side. They want full custody of the child. It's very rare that you find a man who wants 100% custody of the child unless there is genuinely something that is going on that is like really bad, right? With the mother that is in some way is going to harm the child. Most fathers do not say that. It's why you don't really hear about it. Of course, it does happen, but it isn't the common norm. The typical norm, and I'm not blaming women, I'm just stating what I have found, is that it is typically the mother who wants the full custody of the children. And you can see this as well in I was reading online. I was reading a lot of blogs, and I was on a lot of solicitors' Facebook and Instagram pages. And whenever they do a post and I read the questions underneath the posts, one of the most common questions that women want to know, because you can see their pictures and you can see their profiles, is they want to know, how do I get full custody of the child? They want to have the full choice about every aspect of that child. This where what school the child goes to, what faith position they're raised in, literally everything. They want the choice about it. So these are the so those are the first two things that then started building up. And I was very, very shocked by this. And I was very shocked to discover that there are women out there who don't want the man to be in the child's life. I was like, but why would you not want that? And this is, of course, that part of what started to add up and began me on this path of curiosity. Because as I started to look into it and try to figure out, well, why don't people why do women not want the man in their children's life? Why do mothers not want the father to be in the child's life? This then led me to trying to figure out, why would some mothers abandon their children? Now, I wasn't really interested in the why do fathers abandon their children. I was much more interested in, why is it that some mothers don't do abandon their children when the vast majority of them don't. And then I wanted to understand, why is it that there are all these women who don't want the man to be in their life, and they don't want the father to be in the child's life, and all of these sorts of questions. And so this then collided with another point, which was that I started to look at the articles at this around this sort of time. I'd started to train as a psychotherapist and a counselor, and I'd started to really look at scientific research. And so I started to look up research around fatherlessness and all of these issues. And I'll talk about the other two reasons because they link into this. But basically, what happened was I started trying to find research about why fathers abandon their children. And there was only one article that existed on why fathers abandon their children. And I have to tell you, this was very shocking for me, because you have to understand that, especially in the counseling world, there are thousands upon thousands of research papers. And then this also collided with the fact that I wanted to do a level 6 research paper, which would then allow me to be able to go on and do a conversion course so that I could get a master's degree, because my ultimate goal was to be the head of well-being at a university. And when I looked on LinkedIn and I looked at all the qualifications of the people who run the well-being departments of universities and the counseling and the student welfare and all this sort of stuff, they all had master's degrees. So I was like, well, I'm going to need to get a master's degree. The problem is, I don't want to go, I'm already at level 5. I don't want to go to university. But I discovered that from a level 5, you could do a level 6 research paper, and the research paper can then allow you to basically get the equivalent to a degree. It's the last year of a degree, but only the other great thing about it is also research. And of course, I love research. I love finding out stuff. So I was very shocked, because as I'm doing all of this, I'm already starting to read up the courses, what's the course is going to be about. And I'm looking at all the research, and I'm shocked to find that there's only one article. And I'm like, how can there only be one article on the psychological reasons why fathers abandon their children? There were loads of articles about children who have been raised with just a single mum, loads of articles about um, men who've raised children by themselves. Loads of articles about the divorce process. Loads of processes about a mother who's having to raise a child by herself and the impact that has on the child and the mother. Their social economics, their mental health, their well-being, the chances of the child ending up in prison or being not doing well academically. But there was only one piece of research across the world on why the men left, on the reasons. So that really was like, whoa, now that's weird. Why in the world is there no articles? It just didn't make sense to me. I was like, I don't understand why, if all of these men are leaving their children and they're abandoning their children, surely somebody should go and ask them why they're leaving and abandoning their children. And nobody had done it. So remember, all of these things are building up now. So I forgot about that. Now, prior to all of this happening, and this is now a separate thing, I had been working for a number of years as a behavior support worker in a school, in a secondary school. And so my job was to basically deal with kids who were truanting, kids who were not going to their lessons, kids who didn't fit in the formal education system, kids who had things going on for them, and I had to do workshops with them and one-to-ones, and I had to do reports with them, and I would go try to go get them a uniform, and if they got kicked out of lesson, I would go and talk to them and encourage them to go back to lesson, and sometimes we'd go for a walk around just so that they can just relax and breathe because they've been annoyed by a teacher in their lesson. And what would happen was that I'd always say to the students, particularly because most of them were boys, I'd say to them, why are you behaving like this? Like, why are you getting into trouble? Why just behave and just go to lesson and just, it's 50 minutes. It's not that long and just get on with it and sit down and focus. Um, and I would talk to the kids about their life and I would share my story because I wasn't a teacher, I was a behavior support worker, and I would share with them about my struggles. So what ended up happening is that the kids would disclose a lot of information to me, and many of them would disclose to me about their fathers. The fathers were the center of a lot of the issues. They'll be like, well, my dad doesn't care about me. I haven't seen my dad. I would say to them, where is your dad? And they would say, my dad abandoned me. He doesn't care about me, all of these sorts of things. And I was like, hmm, this doesn't sound right because most men that I know are in their children's lives. And it's one of the things that I say in the book. In the book, I say that as bad as most of us think fatherlessness is, and it is bad, the reality is that the vast majority of fathers are actually in their children's lives. Now, how much they are in their children's lives and how engaged they are with their children and how emotionally in tune they are with their children and how much they know about their children is a different conversation. Because this is one of the other reasons why many mothers are very reluctant to allow the children to spend time with their fathers because many of them are they want the father to be full on time with the child, to know everything about the child, to be emotionally engaged with the child. Like they want the father to be like them when they're with the child. But of course, men are not women. They're not mothers, they're fathers. And they engage with the child in a different way. And how much time they spend with the child is different. And the things that they do are different. And so this again causes a lot of conflict. So I would say to the students, I don't think that your dad abandoned you. I think that your dad abandoned the relationship with your mum, but the kids wouldn't listen to that. All they would say is he abandoned me, he left me, he doesn't care about me. So I was like, well, that's weird. So remember now, all of these things are building up, all of these things are accumulating, and it's all adding up to, of course, what eventually ended up happening, which is that I went to therapy. And when you're training to become a therapist, you have to go to therapy because it's like, well, how are you going to become a therapist for other people when you yourself have never been to therapy? And whilst I was in therapy, I had to talk about my life. And one of the things that I talked about and became a revelation for me is that I had been abandoned by my biological father as a child. My father made my mum pregnant at 15, and then he left. He abandoned my mum, he abandoned me. And as we were in therapy, I came to realize, oh my God, I have gone on to do the very same thing that my biological dad did. Now, you have to understand that I promised myself that I would never become like my biological dad. I would never have a child and then abandon them. And then guess what? I'd become the very thing that I swore I'd never become. And I'd done to these children by becoming a sperm donor what they'd done unto me. Now, what I didn't know, okay, which of course I found out in the research, is that when the child, in my particular situation, the children were not abandoned because the children are not being lied to. What I've discovered is what messes kids up is when kids are not told the truth. Because weirdly enough, when I was researching adoption and I was researching fostering, when I donated the sperm to these couples, I said to them that one of the things in the contracts that they have to do is they absolutely have to not lie to the child and they have to tell the child how they came into life. And the reason for this is because I found out that many parents lie to their children about the fact that they were conceived via sperm donor. And then the child goes their whole life discovers this at like 20, and then it rips the rug underneath their life, and they have an identity crisis, and it basically just throws their whole life out of it. But when you tell the child from the outset what's going on, how they came into life, then it's a completely different issue altogether. And so I was very, very explicit about that when I was deciding the people who I wanted to donate to, and who I wanted them to help them bring a child into the world. And so I'm in therapy and I'm realizing, my God, I have become a hypocrite. And I realized I didn't really abandon the children, because the children are going to know how they came into existence and into life. And in fact, one of the things that I talk about is, historically, if you look at um, fatherlessness. Fatherlessness has always existed, but it's existed in terms of fathers dying in wars. Fathers are dying because they've died in an accident at work, and they died on a farm or something like that. In other words, you could explain to the child and give them a reason why their father isn't in their life, but the reason wasn't because the child had been abandoned. What messes the child up is when the child lives from shame, where they believe that they are bad. There is something wrong with them. They have been abandoned. That's what messes kids up. But when kids have a legitimate reason why their father isn't there, they're not messed up. And what, of course, I went on to discover is that many of the men who, and this is the final reason, many of the men, when I started my private practice, my private practice is specifically aimed at boys and men. So I only work with boys and men. Um, all these men would come into therapy, and I'd be talking to them about protective factors, and many of them would be talking to me about suicide and talking to me about their relationships and the struggles in their relationships. And I would, of course, inevitably ask them about their upbringing, about their mum, their relationship with their mum. Do they have any siblings? I would ask them about their dad, about grandparents, about their friendships. And the common denominator with all the men who were really, really struggling is that they did not have their father in their life. And then I would ask the men why they don't have their father in their life, and they would say, I don't know. In other words, they did not have a reason. In some of the cases, some of the children knew where their father lived, or they, they've seen their father walking by, or the fathers walked by, and they've never said anything to them. Or, of course, emotionally, the fathers were there, but sorry, physically, the fathers were there, but the fathers weren't there emotionally. And I was wondering, well, why? I wanted to know why. What's going on? Why are these fathers not seeing their kids? How can you know that your child lives in a town and then you don't go and see them? So remember, all of this is now linking to the women who didn't want the fathers to be in their life. I then start speaking to some of my friends about what I'm discovering, and then people start saying all of these, well, the mother's stopping them. And so all of these things are all collecting and building up to, of course, lead to me deciding that I need to figure out why these fathers are abandoning their children. And that was kind of it. So those are really all the reasons that built up and accumulated and forced me to have to look into this area, because I was like, if I'm truly going to help my male clients, how the hell can I help them if I don't know why their fathers are leaving? I need to know. And then actually, the other final reason, it's not really reason six, I would say reason 5.1 is I wanted to bring people together. In the Black community, there's a lot of men who are really struggling, women struggling, mothers. There are people who are lonely. There are people who are suffering, who are in pain. And so I wanted to bring people together. I wanted to bring families together. Um, and this is what motivated me to start looking into this area. So that is it. I hope that has given you some insight. The book is not out yet, by the way, in case you're wondering. The book will be out probably sometime in February. I've finished it now, but it has to go through editing and all sorts of things. But I hope that kind of answers why I wrote the book. I don't know what your thoughts are, or maybe why your father left, or why you're abandoning your children. Comment below, send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, I will leave you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, or evening, or morning, or afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. And I'll speak to you very soon. Bye for now.